I guess I would say welcome to the House Republicans caucus room. And Senate, do you have any opening statements that you'd like to make?
Well, I just want to, I'm sure that you'll all have a number of questions on a number of different issues, but there is one important proposal that we wanted to start to lay the groundwork for today. As you are probably familiar, there is a significant wait list for our disabled population in getting the type of respite and care services that are so necessary. And so one of the important priorities of the Majority Coalition Caucus is to find solutions for the DD community to work through some of these issues and to find resources and put them towards solving this problem and shrinking this wait list to get people the services that they need more quickly. And so Senator Hill has joined us today. We've been working on a proposal that he will lay out. Again, it's in its early stages. And we've been working with stakeholders on it to get input, but we think that this is an important step forward in solving a very important problem for our disability community. And so I want to turn it over to Senator Hill to kind of give a brief breakdown of what the proposal is.
Great, well thanks for coming today. So I just released my Windows into the Budget kind of blog post, and it introduces the Vulnerable Individuals Priority Act. We call it the VIP Act, and it really goes after our individuals with disability in the state. We deliver very good care to those that receive the care. The problem is we have about 5,000 people on a wait list. And these people on the wait list, they need respite care to give the families that are caring for these individuals a break. And they also need help with employment. We were one of the first states to come out and really focus on employment services for the disabled. We just haven't had the money to fund it. So what this proposal does is addresses this wait list in a budget neutral way that will get 4,000 people on the wait list that need respite care, that care they need, and the 1,000 individuals that need employment supports, the support they need through the state. We're able to accomplish this by taking advantage of a new federal incentive program to keep people in the community setting. The wonky part of it is right now we get a 50% match for Medicaid. Now we get a 56% match if we adopt this program. Oregon just adopted it a year ago. We kind of wanted to see how it worked for them. It's worked out well, so we feel that we can go through, take this little bit take this 6% additional match, and with that, pay for all these services. We believe that within the next 4 years, we can get that wait list to zero. And this is really significant for a couple of key reasons. First of all, it keeps families together. I mean, we know that generally the best situation is to stay in home or in the community and to stay with the family. And these families are the people that are caring for these individuals day in and day out. To give them the respite care helps keep them in the families. That keeps them out of an institution. We think it's better for the individuals. We also think it keeps the cost down for the state. When you talk about employment, you talk about the self-worth that comes from gainful employment. We have a great employment program right now. To add 1,000 people to that, get them off of the wait list, is a profound change. And finally, 5,000 families have been waiting for these services will finally get the support they need. And we have heard from years from the community, the stakeholders, that we do a good job, but there's just so many people that they feel like they win a lottery when they get the services. We're going to take that away. We're going to get it for everybody. And then finally, I consider this part of what I kind of look at as smart budgeting, showing that we can reform the system, we can improve the services we provide, but in a budget neutral way, without raising more revenues. Again, being smart about how we live within our means and with the funds available to us. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions.
Just on the...
Or do you want to?
Yeah, if we could continue to do some opening comments.
Great.
Is that okay? So the other thing that I would do, kind of following up on Senator Hill's...
Sorry, can you read that?
Wait for the mics to pass. Fantastic.
You'll be more famous that way.
Thank you. Following up on Senator Hill's, obviously caring for our disabled citizens are most vulnerable in the state of Washington. It has been a priority. It shows in our budget last year. You can see it's a priority going forward. There's another bill that we have, Senator Oban proposed, Senate Bill 6122, and it has a companion in the House that looks at the long-term planning. Basically, it addresses some of the audit findings that were brought by our state auditor and says we need to plan to address those. So we're trying to address providing the appropriate care for our disabled community on kind of several fronts, both with funding and more services, and in making sure with this bill by Senator Oban, looking at making sure that we're doing a very good job with what we already currently have, and that we're correcting the problems in the system that's currently in place today. I personally like the bill because we have broad bipartisan support, including sponsored by sponsored by the 25th district, the 26th district, the 27th district, the 28th district, and the 29th district. For those of you who care, that's all here. It's big chunks of Pierce County. So Jordan knows all about that.
I think for House Republicans, Norma has a few words to say, but I would like to add that going back for many years with Gary Alexander, we have felt strongly that our job here is to prioritize our spending towards the people that are most vulnerable. And there is almost no one more vulnerable in our society than members of the DD community. And if you're on a budget committee, you have a lot of experience speaking with people that live this life every day. And to me, one of the most emotional experiences you have here is talking to parents who are terrified about what happens when they're gone. And there can be nothing, I think, more important for us than to address this to the best of our ability within the dollars that we have. Norma?
And I just want to add, I don't know how many of you remember, but several years ago during the budget battles, there was a proposal that was brought to us that would actually go the opposite direction on employment security for our developmentally disabled community. We were able to stop that, and to see this going in a different direction is really exciting. And I just want to add to this, it's not just supporting the families, and it's not just providing that employment support for so that folks with in our DD community can live with the dignity that we all desire in our own lives. We need them in our lives as much as we want to support them. The diversity when we're working together, when our hearts are find common ground on issues, when we can celebrate with someone their goals and achievements as they celebrate our own. We need one another. We need to be integrated in our communities far more than we are. And so this is a terrific step forward.
And so from my perspective, the DD community, when you take it out into that personal level and you've gone out and you've met with these people in your communities and the stories that they'll tell you about taking care of their son 24/7, and yet they have other children, and the effect on the other children and the effect of their family. One family, the woman was suicidal, and the only way she actually got help in the respite care situation was when she said, I'm going to kill myself. And this, to me, is a way, and what this bill is doing is a way to prevent that, and to, it's for the good of people, not just that person with a disability, but that entire family. And so I think.
And I want to talk briefly about what these supported employment, in particular, services are. These are agencies, for folks that aren't aware, that have a series of caseworkers that are more like ambassadors to the business community. And they work with both families with members who are disabled. They work with those families, but they also then go out and work with businesses. And they encourage businesses to participate in these programs, to offer these supported employment programs to their clients. And then they work with the businesses to change the way the business works to accommodate. So if there is some modest accommodation that a business can make to help someone with a developmental disability be able to have that job, where it's in a mailroom or it's in Safeway or if it's out of Fred Meyer, these are large companies that have a number of supported employment employees working for them. They find ways to help these companies adjust the way that they do business so that they actually can be good homes for the developmentally disabled and to provide jobs. And so, and some estimates show that for every dollar invested, there's $1.44 that comes back. So it's an incredible jobs program. And it's an incredible social services program that really works from the ground up. And so we're hoping that as we have more conversations, we can move this through the process.
Senator Hill, do you plan to put additional money toward a program like this? And speaking of additional revenue, are you currently working on a supplemental budget?
So we're looking at what the options are with the supplemental budget. As I mentioned, with this program, what we do is we adopt the community first choice option, which is a federal government program, which allows us to get a bigger federal match, and that's where we get the extra dollars for this. So again, it's done within existing revenues, and without raising taxes or raising revenue.
But getting back to the idea of a budget, when you say you're exploring options, does that mean a decision hasn't yet been made on whether to do a supplemental budget? Or, because my understanding is the Senate would have to come out first with a supplemental budget. Are you planning on doing that?
Correct. So we're looking at, right now we're going through the governor's proposed budget, and we kind of do an agency by agency scrub. You see what we've got, we see what what policy adds that people are asking for. And once we get our arms around everything, we can kind of get a better feeling for what we might want to be able to do in terms of whether it's supplemental
But
budget.
it's possible you won't do one.
It is possible we won't do them. I mean, you can get out of here without one. Again, we don't, for the first time since 2008, we don't have a deficit, so we don't need to rewrite the budget. And so we're looking at other options of how we can best do it within the 60 days that we have.
Anybody else have a question? Next question? Right here, CR, did you have a question?
I have a question on minimum wage. I guess I'll do it to Senator Hill since the mics are there. But, the governor called for upwards of $2 more. Kind of where is, I guess, both caucuses at on raising the minimum wage this session?
So if I could jump in on that, that's a great question. But we're going to have a jobs proposal press conference next week, and I think that's a really great question for them. I think they're prepared to address that in a very meaningful way and a comprehensive way, probably better than we're able to do today.
Okay.
Brad?
I have a question on a bill that Sharon Brown introduced yesterday that would take away the governor's power to appoint members of the Public Disclosure Commission. I believe Senator Dameyer, Senator Becker, and Senator Hill, you're all signatories in that order on the bill.
Yeah.
Can you say what the rationale is for that? I haven't been able to find Senator Brown.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to address that, Brad, because I'm a little bit concerned because one of the headlines on that bill kind of took it the exact opposite of where that bill is intended. The goal of that bill is to change the governments to depoliticize the investigations and the work that the Public Disclosure Commission does. That's why the governance structure that they adopt is modeled after the redistricting commission, where you get kind of this balanced representation, and you've got to have cooperation before they can make a ruling. It's done in response to some of the more recent rulings and the perception that the PDC in some cases treats certain candidates maybe different than other candidates. So we believe it represents a fair, more balanced way of looking at governance of that very important agency rather than the current model, which has the governing appointees.
Do you have examples of where there's preferential treatment?
Excuse me. So one of the responses was a couple of examples would be where there are decisions made to have an investigation kind of linger throughout a campaign, and then in this last cycle, we had a situation where the PDC came down very quickly on an allegation against Mr. Stair concerning his violation of the Public Disclosure Commission laws with regard to when he could move money and how much money could be moved at a certain point in time. So that's what kind of raises the specter of, is there partisan politics involved in the governance of the Public Disclosure Commission? They have a critically important role, and therefore we want to say, is there a better way to set up the government's model that engenders much broader confidence and support?
In that case, that was him closing down his state committee. What was the objection to what the PDC did on that?
So the specific issue in that one was they were moving money outside of the state law's prohibition. You moved a larger chunk of money than state law restricts, not more than $5,000 after that certain date. He moved money. For whatever reason, he moved money past our date. It appeared on its face to be a violation of the law, and the PDC came out very, very quickly based on a phone call. It's just, the importance of having them as a neutral arbiter, not being shaped by politics, that we can all trust their actions, is really, really important. And we think that a change in governance model, at least in the bill proposed by Senator Brown, a change in the governance model could engender greater confidence in their work. Let's see, so, anybody, John's already had one, does anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I was just following up on his.
Okay. Follow up, John.
No, I've got my own question I want to ask. And
Perfect.
it's on, there was 3 bills introduced today by the House Democrats regarding teachers' wages. One was a COLA increase, and the other one I'm interested in is setting a minimum teacher's wage of slightly more than $50,000 a year. What's your response to that?
Well, I will start. Some of you may know I'm married to a teacher. So we see teacher pay as kind of a kitchen table issue at my house. First of all, I haven't seen these bills. They're brand new. Second of all, I think, as always, if you're a budget writer, you think very hard about how do you fit the various parts of the education budget together as you get towards the end of the session, and you actually have to have a budget that balances if we are going to have a budget this time. And lastly, for a lot of us, there's a considerable amount of confusion caused by recent statements by the court as to whether or not teachers' compensation is a part of basic education. So we're going to pay attention to those bills. Education is a huge priority based on what our voters want and what the Constitution says, and we will make the best choice that we can with the kids being uppermost in our mind.
That's why I'm sitting down here. If there were any education questions, I'd be happy to talk to them and talk about kind of where we're at. We heard what the court had to say, and obviously we respect the Supreme Court's decision in McCleary and the original court order. We believe that education is the top priority. It should be funded first and amply. We do have a framework for that, and as we move forward, we moved through the joint task force on education funding, and what we found in that task force is there were members that decided to try to grow the box. We had a framework set up, and the box continued to grow. At this point, new bills are being dropped and continue to be dropped that continue to grow that box. So at this point, obviously, I have not read the bills either, so I'm not going to comment specifically on what they say, because I don't know. But as we look at teacher compensation, it is something that we are going to have to solve. Does it get solved in this short 60-day session? I think we need to be more thoughtful and comprehensive when we look at teacher salaries, when we look at student outcomes tied to teacher salaries. It's very important. So our most important thing is making sure that we're moving forward, and we are going to fully fund education. We do have a plan for that, and be excited to share that with you as the session moves forward.
But is that plan going to satisfy the court? I mean, the court's ruling this year seems to have an urgency of something, they want to hear from you by April 30th. And so I think there's some lack of clarity on whether the legislature as a whole has to take some sort of action to satisfy the court. Do you feel that there's just a smaller group that has to meet and present another report, but doesn't the whole legislature want to sign off on that? I mean, what's the sense of urgency from your perspective, and what do you think must be done so that the court either doesn't issue another ruling or find you in contempt? Well,
Sure, I'll jump in on that one.
We want to make sure that all
So,
of our words get.
first of all, getting back to some of the bills that were being dropped, one of the things that's critically important is the legislature come together on these issues. So bills being dropped that haven't been worked, that don't have broad support across the rotunda and broad bipartisan support, all that's going to do is magnify the problem, right? We need to be finding a solution to come together to address the real issues here of making sure we're living up to our paramount duty. So I'm concerned when we have bills that are dropped that seem to be moving the goalpost. I'm concerned that we have those kind of things. We've got to be finding ways that we can address the core issues. And I bring that up with respect to this in one key area. One of the things that the court had talked about in previous rulings and in their orders, particularly when they talked about administrative salaries, is in many cases it's not the amount that someone is paid, particularly when you talk about administrators and principals, it's the share. Right now the state has clearly pushed too much of its responsibility for funding basic education back on our local school districts to fund with their local levies. That's an imminent issue that we need to address and need to address in a bipartisan, bicameral way. So there's some things that we can do. I hope that we can be working together towards solutions. Some bills seem to be trying to drive us the opposite way. And personally, it would have been, if the Supreme Court was hopeful to have a plan by April 30th, it certainly would have been beneficial if that would have been dropped, if they could have issued that order earlier. The legislature doesn't move on a dime, has a lot of thought, and there's a lot of work that goes into this, and this is a very complex issue, which has issues like binding future legislators and other things. So coming up with the right plan is more important in my mind, and getting strong commitment of the entire legislature to it is more important than, in this case, trying to meet an arbitrary deadline that might set us up for failure.
So does that mean that you'd like to reduce local levies authority this year, or you talked about the balance between districts and the state? So what does that mean?
No,
this year?
The answer to your question is no, but we do, as a legislature, need to address the local funding issue. Right now, we have put too much of it out on our local districts. A child's education should not be fundamentally affected by the zip code that they live in. The Constitution is very clear. All is all, regardless of where you live. And right now, with the current way that we fund education, with our over-reliance, and I agree with the court in this, the over-reliance on local funding means we are getting inequitable education for our students. And that is not acceptable. It's a responsibility of the state. We need to take a fresh look at the system that we allow, what's being funded, what's not being funded, and how to do it. So what you're going to see is a proposal that we move out strongly and address that over the interim and come in ready to act in 2015.
So it's for the next year. And
Yeah, it's too important, too complex to try to do in a short session.
Is capital also for next year any kind of capital help for school districts with their buildings for, so that they can actually do some of this all-day K and reducing class size? Do you think that's needed, and is that something for next year too?
So, two things with respect to that. That is really the first time that the court's brought up the capital requirement, which is a little concerning if you're sitting in our seat. That all of a sudden, if we're responsible for all of the funding for class sizes in K-3 for building a classroom, that's a big, significant additional requirement on the legislature that we got to wrestle with. That said, we do there is an effort at least in the Senate to leverage the capital budget more appropriately into Article 9. It doesn't say that it's a paramount duty for the state of Washington for the operating budget and excluding the capital budget. So we're looking for ways to make sure that our capital budget reflects that same paramount duty. There's a couple of bills out there right now. One with respect to a grant program for science, technology, engineering, and math laboratories, so we can help districts which have inadequate facilities make some money available to allow them to make sure their students have that same opportunity to access those great STEM career fields. And I believe there's a bill, and actually I know there's a bill in the House, and we dropped a companion in the Senate, looking at the Housing Trust Fund and how can we better leverage those monies to great impacts for students as well. There's a great program in the Tacoma Public Housing Authority has a fantastic program with tremendous success in leveraging that with the Tacoma Public School District.
Just to be clear, so what is the response to the governor's call for COLAs this session?
The legislature acted on COLAs last session, and we suspended them for the course of the biennium. So whether the legislature has a will to change that, we've already acted, we will have to wait and see. But at this point, from my perspective, the legislature's acted once. We got to be moving forward, and we have a short session.
But it called for this session, specifically this session, so I guess what we're all trying to pin you down on, and I'll take the heat for it. COLAs 2014, yes or no from your side?
So, since the lack of everybody jumping on me.
I can certainly speak from the budget.
So a couple of things that I would point out. First of all, most of our school districts and most of our school district employees have been seeing increases throughout the last 6 years through their local bargaining agreements. So I want to make sure that we know that we recognize that it's not like school district employees haven't been seeing increases, both kind of percentage increases and in some cases step increases. The real issue here is the share. Is the state living up to its share of their funding? That gets back to this compensation discussion that Representative Dahlquist brought up. So it's a bigger issue, and I think beyond COLAs at this point.
Could I just jump in on the capital budget side? I think it's really important to remember that with the capital budget that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support last year, we have a cap to what we can do in the capital budget. It's very limited this year. And I know I've met with my communities. I know that the issue of wanting to take advantage and moving to those smaller class sizes is absolutely critical. I've served on my school board and I was an advocate for that 20 years ago. So how we do that is a priority, I think, for everyone to ensure that children have the opportunities that we've all acknowledged we want them to have. We do have to operate within the limits of our capacity with our debt load on the capital budget side this year. So what we do this year versus what we plan to do with a new fresh budget and a much more flexibility going into 15 is yet to be determined.
Okay, so it's a no for COLAs this year, reading between the lines.
Well, so we write budgets on a 2-year basis here. And we're the first state in the country to require a 4-year balanced budget. We did a lot of heavy lifting last session. Took us a little longer than we would have liked to write a 2-year budget. And it balances over 4 years. The problem when you start doing things in a supplemental budget is that if you spend $1 in this year's supplemental budget, you end up having to spend $3 in the next biennial budget. And so it's a bow wave effect. And so what happens if you start doing stuff this year, you start throwing that 4-year balanced budget out of whack. Right now it is balanced, but it's pretty tight. And so, and again, we went through a lot of work last year. We got agreement, bicameral, bipartisan, the most bipartisan budget in 20 years to move forward this way. It's very difficult to then start changing that, and a lot of moving pieces. You dial something one way, it blows up going further. So it's kind of a tube of toothpaste, but it really will blow out if you squeeze too hard in this end. And so from that reason, I think that's why you're seeing resistance to this, because we spent so much time working on it last year. We've got a budget, it's balanced over 4 years. It's very difficult to do stuff in a short session when it has huge impacts going forward.
Do you know the last time the state hadn't passed a supplemental budget?
I do not know when the last time it happened, no. Certainly not in the 3 years I've been.
Can you elaborate a little more on the calculus of not doing supplemental? What are the pluses and minuses? Where do you run into trouble? Whether it's prisons or caseloads? What are you weighing to decide what strategy to take?
You look. Some of the things you look at is we have caseload changes, we have maintenance level changes. Can you do that formulaic versus specifically? In other words, can you say Department A can exceed or spend money from next year at a 5% level versus Department A should get $2,000 more, where it's a big long list. Really, what a lot of it comes down to us is how many additional non-maintenance level things you want to add in the budget. Again, this is a supplemental year. We don't have to do a lot of big cuts. That's what drives supplemental budgets in the past. And also, there's not a lot of money, and I don't think there's a lot of time to do huge policy ads. As I said, you've got that problem, that bow wave problem. So if you get a situation where you just have maintenance level type things you want to do and you don't have a lot of policy ads, you could probably get away with either a very skinny one or with one that is that can be more formulaic. And if you do have for example, we've got a lawsuit that we lost on children's mental health. right? We will have to fund that. You can do that in a separate bill, right? You can do the appropriation out of the bill, similar to what we did in the special session when we did some appropriations for workforce training.
When do you think you'll make a decision one way or another on whether to move forward with a supplemental budget or not?
It'll take another week or two as we scrub through the maintenance level and the governor's request and other agency requests.
As long as Senator Hill's got the microphone.
I don't want to hog it though.
There's a bill that would basically do away with the Discover Pass, it would make it voluntary, and find some other funding for parks. Is that a priority for the caucus this session to do that? And what do you think about in general, putting some extra money into the parks this year?
Well, I think that, if you look at the benefit that state parks have to the citizens, it's very broad. We kind of shifted the way we funded state parks from a general fund to a user fee with the Discover Pass. It's had varying degrees of success, but significant voter response that this is really a hassle, especially when you have 27 different types of licenses and passes and snow park permits and hunting license, fishing license, that we're looking to try and simplify that. But again, kind of following what we did with the VIP Act is we're looking at ways we can do that with an existing means and find ways within the government we can pay for it so we don't, because again, we don't have that revenue right now. So I think that the benefit is pretty large and the amount of money we're talking about is not a backbreaker, but it's going to have to be done within existing resources.
The House has been very interested in this. The truth is, House Republicans and Republicans in the Senate represent a lot of the rural areas where there's a lot of parks and wilderness areas, and we have not been real happy with the implementation of the system, and we have been very unhappy with the sense that it's been imposed in certain ways in kind of an unfair way, sometimes even a deceptive way. And so we, I think, believe strongly that in the long run, we want to find a way for the public to be paying for parks so that the public can use it. The people that use the parks the most often are young families that can least afford a Discovery Pass. But like we've said on some other issues, this is not anything to open up the budget for in this year.
We're going to take one more question here because I know there's a number of members have to get going.
Well, I wanted to ask Senator Becker about medical marijuana. I know there was a hearing yesterday. Can
Thank you.
Just talk a little bit about whether you think that is something that must be addressed this session, and do you anticipate something coming out of your committee in the coming weeks?
Well, as you know, we had two bills that we heard yesterday, and actually I was really tickled because people were really focused on what they wanted us to hear this time. And we have two bills with two different things in them and two different methodologies. So we're working through those two bills right now to see should both bills move forward and should both bills move to Commerce so that they can work with the Liquor Control Board in that committee and how they'll be set up so they can look at them as a whole rather than looking at just the pieces. So I think that something will move forward this year. I think it's necessary, but I'm not sure what it'll be yet.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good seeing you.